All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our October edition of the webinar series. My name is Samuel, your co-host. We're excited to be part of this journey with you. I just want to say that you should get ready for an insightful conversation, expert advice, takeaways. Just a minute. Okay, for speaker here. So before we begin, I'd like to thank all our speakers, sponsors, ICYA board members, and of course, all of the participants for making this event. Today's highlight includes two presentations that discusses the various career paths and opportunities available for agricultural students, including government roles to transition smoothly from academic to professional life. We encourage you to participate through the Q&A session. So we would have the two presentations, and then we have a Q&A and discussion session after. I implore every one of you to let's make this conversation valuable and enjoyable. With me this morning is moderator, Dr. Kenneth Wu. Dr. Kenneth recently convocated for his PhD degree earlier this week. So the very beautiful sights to behold. He studied things relating to wild bird protection in Nova Scotia, and right now he's continuing on his postdoctoral degree at the University. Please join me with Dr. Nku to introduce the first speaker for this week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel Yerubi, for that interesting introduction. And thanks for reminding me for my graduation this week. Yeah, people were expecting me to probably relax, but unfortunately, the next day I had to be in school. Yeah, thanks so much, and welcome to today's webinar session. This is the second month where we are having this program, and today, as has been rightly said, we'll be having two interesting discussions. And to set the ball rolling, we'll be having Dr. Timi Ojo to start with his presentation, and then we'll have a second speaker in the person of Dr. Olufemi Babatunde to actually step in and also have his presentation. Afterwards, then we'll follow up with some questions that probably are bothering us, and we would actually set the page with some questions. And has been rightly said, if there are other questions that you think might be vital to the conversation, you can text them into the chat section. And to help us with our first presentation, I'll just read something brief about Dr. Timi Ojo, and then he would actually step in with this presentation. It's a very interesting, an interesting personality as I went through his bio. But I'll just give us a very a summarized version of that bio. So he is actually born. He was born and bred in Nigeria, and then after his BSc, he pursued his MSc and PhD in agrometeorology at the Department of Soil Science at the University of Manitoba, Canada. He is currently the acting manager of crop production with Manitoba Agriculture, and he is an adjunct professor at the Department of Soil Science at the University of Manitoba, where he currently co-supervises 3 graduate students. Dr. Ojo regularly gives scientific and extension presentations to a wide range of audiences, from farmer groups to invited presentations at conferences. And I would end with this. He is a past president of the Manitoba Soil Science Society, as well as the Canadian Society of Agriculture and Forest Meteorology. I also amazed reading this bio, and humbly help me invite and welcome Dr. Timi Ojo. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it, and congratulations on the convocation. That's great. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present. And I have just about 15 to 20 minutes to have this conversation with everyone. And I prepared just one or two slides, but the focus isn't so much on the slide, and I'm going to share it. But the focus is going to be mostly on the conversation that we would be having today. And I look forward to your questions as well. Hey, I am just give me a moment to share what I've got prepared. And I should also say that my presentation today, um, I'm not here to speak on behalf of Government of Manitoba. So I'm here to speak. So every discussion that I'll be having and conversations and answers I'll be providing to any question you may have is totally just on a personal basis, not speaking on behalf of Government of Manitoba. So I thought today I'm wearing my Blue Bomber jersey. I'm a big fan of the Blue Bombers. The CFL, we have a game later today, actually in about an hour's time. And my presentation today is focused on entering government space for agriculture students. And I decided to put this picture of Zach Collaros. He is the quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And football, in as much as, well, I know football here in Canada, some people call it American football. It's just football to me. The other one is soccer. And I used to be a big fan of soccer, except that now that I watch soccer and sometimes the game ends 0-0, I'm thinking, did I just waste 90 minutes of my time watching a game that doesn't have a goal? But football is such an interesting game, and that's because of positioning. The team has three sets of players. So there is the player that plays the offense. So when the ball is with the team, you have the offensive players. You have the defense. That's when the opponent have the ball. The defense they are the crew that gets on the field. And then you have the special teams. And each of these three phases of the game is very important. And today, my focus would be on positioning in terms of entering government spaces for agricultural students. Actually has a lot to do with positioning. And here I'm assuming that I'm speaking to an audience that is mostly currently agricultural students or maybe recent graduates. But even if you don't fall within those categories, I think this conversation will still be applicable to you. And in terms of entering government spaces, I said, the first thing is positioning yourself to enter. So what do you need to do to position yourself to enter? Oftentimes when I meet students or just anyone wanting to be in government, I've been with government for over 9 years with Manitoba Agriculture. And one of the interesting things that I do ask for is, what's your area of research? Can you just give me that elevated 60 minutes, 60-second speech about what you do? And I'm often surprised at how that gets a lot of people, it catches them off guard. And in as much as you know what you do, that's great. You need to be able to convey it to others. So if there's something I want to encourage students about, if you have an area of interest, if you're undergraduate students, graduate students, whichever, wherever you are on that continuum, you need to be able to have a clear and concise way of passing your message across. What are you interested in? What's the driving force? What's the motivation behind what you do? In my case, I had my bachelor's in Nigeria, University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, and when I did my project, my final year project in my fifth year, I planted okra, and my project was to look at the impact of organomineral fertilizer, so organic and inorganic fertilizer, the impact on the growth and development of okra. Now, what happened was that after I applied my treatments, I put in the fertilizer and the manure. 3 hours later, it rained heavily and it washed everything away. And I had to wait about a week to reapply the treatment because I had to get the treatment from more plantation in Ibadan. I went back, I got more treatment. And the week after I reapplied my treatment, established my plot, the very next day, the same thing happened. So this happened twice in a row. And the third time, thank God, I was able to get the treatment established. But that really taught me the importance of weather impact on agriculture. And that became a motivation for me that I wanted to study the impact of weather on agriculture. And the next thing I did with that was, okay, I was looking for opportunities abroad, wanting to just understand the interaction, the synergy, and how weather plays a critical role in agriculture. And everyone knows, depending on which, regardless of the area of specialization, weather plays a critical factor, livestock, crops, fruit and vegetables, whatever you're doing, weather is such a really key factor. And for me, that was the motivation in terms of getting into what I got into. So I came here, studied research on how soil moisture influences the establishment, the growth of crops. And in starting that, we realized that most of the equipment that is being used widely in US and in Canada were actually not as accurate as they should be. So I had a divergent into really studying what are the differences between the various sensors that are being used. So I'm sharing that with you to just say that regardless of the area of specialization you are, you need to be able to have a 60-second speech that conveys that area of interest. And the way you convey that area of interest also matters. It should be something that you are very, very passionate about. And that's because, especially if you're a PhD student or a recent grad or a master's student, you're at that level in which you are becoming an authority in your field. Even if you're an undergraduate student, you likely have an area of interest. When you discuss with people out there, they need to, you need to show why you're interested in what you're doing. And it has to be convincing. It's not just, I just got into it because that's the only area that my supervisor has some funding and I have no choice. And I just got into it. I found myself, just sleepwalking into my research or into my interest. And I don't even know if I'm going to do it long term. I have no choice. That does not convey to me someone that is really interested and passionate about what they are doing. So that's the first area of interest in terms of really in positioning yourself. You want it to be something that you are really passionate about. I had the opportunity to speak with Zach Colaros, who, as I show here, is the quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And last month, there was an event that, and I was chatting with him about his journey in Winnipeg, and he's been to so many different teams in Canada before he came to Winnipeg in 2019, I believe, just before the playoffs to the Grey Cup. And he led the team to Grey Cup, and he's been one of the most successful quarterbacks we've ever had in Winnipeg. And he was sharing with me his passion about football. And it's really just easy to see that, wow, this guy is really passionate about what he's doing. So I want to say that please make sure that you're passionate about what you're doing. That would come true when you discuss with anyone. And this doesn't have to be with, entering government necessarily only, but regardless of your area of expectation in terms of where you want to land, being interested in what you're doing is very important. The second aspect I want to just share is you need to know the skills you are bringing to the table. It's not just enough to say, I want to work for the government. Yeah, that's good. But what are you bringing to the table? What is that gap that you've noticed within government that you think your skill set would be valuable in really just making sure that, that gap no longer exists? And to be able to understand the gap that exists, you need to know how government works. You need to know, people that are doing what you want to do. So you need to be able to articulate the skills you are bringing to the table, and it has to be something specific. And this is maybe more geared towards those that are doing their master's or PhD, or you already have your master's or PhD and you've published a paper, or even if you haven't published a paper, but the research you're doing, try to draw a straight line between the research you're doing and how it's applicable to government. So if you're in genomics, for instance, which aspect of genomics are you doing, and what's the current gap in government? And when I talk about government, it's not just the federal government, AEFC, and that's great, but also think about provincial governments as well. And the other thing is, which province are you at? What's the structure like in that province? So these are things that you need to really be able to articulate, and you do most of these things by research. Um, if you're a student already, especially a postgrad student, you are familiar with conducting research, doing your literature review. It's just the same way. I have a set of questions, I have a set of hypotheses. Tell yourself, well, where's the gap right now in Saskatchewan? Where's the gap in Manitoba? Where's the gap in Ontario? And how will my skill set, how will my area of expertise be applicable and be valuable in filling those gaps? And one thing I do say often is, don't just tell me what you can do. I want you to show me. Show me what you can do. Now, you likely won't show me, all the various equipment and laboratory things that you're doing. The places you can show, where can you show it? And that would be, where do farmers go? Where do government people go? What are those events that you have close by at your university? I know in Manitoba we have the Manitoba Agronomist Conference that brings together over 200, 300 agronomists, researchers, and you can present a poster. As a student, I remember at the time when I wanted to attend that particular conference, Manitoba Agronomist Conference, my advisor told me, well, we don't have a lot of money. And I approached one of the organizers and I said, I want to attend this conference, but I don't have the registration money. And he said, oh yeah, for sure, students can attend for free as long as you volunteer. And I'm like, yeah, definitely count me in. So every year as a student, I volunteer for Manitoba Agronomist Conference. And that was really key because I was able to network and meet many people in government. So that's why I said, don't just tell me your capability and the skills you are bringing to the table. Show me. When you show people what you are able to do and what you are bringing to the table, it doesn't take a lot of convincing. The other aspect that I would also say, I mentioned, draw a line between what you're doing right now in terms of your area of interest and what you want to get to. In my case, I was working on soil moisture sensors and soil moisture monitoring. And I reached out to one of the Manitoba Agriculture staff that was in charge of, it was the provincial agrometeorologist at the time, not knowing that I was going to fill that role in future. But I reached out to him and said, I have this equipment and I need weather data. Can I just come out to watch you install a weather station? For the most part, when people see that you are very when they see the level of interest you show in something, they oftentimes would say yes. Now, I'm not assuming that it's always going to be yes. No, I've had a lot of no's as well. But with persistence, you'd be able to get the right people that would say yes and would be that catalyst to help you grow in that aspect. So in my case, I reached out to the person and they said, oh, definitely, you can come on out. So I went with him in 2009, installed some weather stations with him, and we were actually able to collaborate because I installed some of my soil moisture sensors at the Manitoba Agriculture Weather Network. And before I even got the job, I started the job in 2016, but as a student from 2009, I was very familiar with the setup that the province had for weather network. And within the weather station, they have, temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind speed, but nothing about soil moisture. So I was able to convince them to say, can we partner and can I install some of my sensors at your field? You have the data logger already, you have the power, the solar panel. This is just an extra sensor. And they were gracious enough to say, yes, let's do that. In 2011, Manitoba had quite a major flood, and the sensors I installed were really valuable in providing soil moisture data for the flood forecasters in the province. And it's just, again, that's the little connection I made in 2009. paid off 2 years later, and I found myself being at the center of providing data for the government to analyze and understand what the soil temperature fluxes were, the fluctuation in soil temperature, because that determines the depth of frost. And that was really critical in terms of me being able to have a voice to say, why don't we do it this way? As a master student, being thrown into that, being trusted into that. But it all started from, again, not just me telling them what I'm interested in, but making sure that I take that next step of saying, can I be part of what you're doing? So I would want to encourage the listeners out there that think about what you're doing and the skills you've got. Try to think about who in your province, who in AAFC, in government. And I won't want you to limit yourself to government, but although, again, I know more about government because that's the area I've been at, working at over the last number of years. So think about that, like who in government is doing something related to what I'm doing, and try to reach out to them. Let the person know that this is the skill set you've got, and this is what you've done. These are the results you obtained from your research. And if you don't have any research profile, if you're an undergraduate student, let them know you're interested in learning. You just want to know more about what they do. What do their day-to-day activities look like? And what really gets them motivated about the job they do? And try to just build connection that way. What are the opportunities? In my case, as a master's student, I would go with the ag med specialist at the time. When they have extension events to talk to farmers and talk to people, they would actually ask me to come along because they don't know a lot about soil moisture. They see me as the expert on soil moisture. So they give their presentation about temperature and how the growing degree days is affecting things and in terms of crop production. And they will turn it over to me to say, and we have a master student here that can tell you more about soil moisture. And then I just give my spiel about soil moisture and how, what we are seeing, the fluctuation. Sometimes I print out some fact sheets to hand out. And it was really great because that way I was able to get my name out there to an extent such that before I finished my master's and then I started PhD, I had a lot of contact in industry and within government. And then the next aspect was also me stepping out to volunteer at some of those events and extension events. If there's something that they want someone to speak on, I would be the first to say that, yes, soil moisture is everything. When you hear me speak, you will think that the most important thing in agriculture is soil moisture. That's what you would think. And at some point, someone says, Timi, every time I hear you speak, I just want to just listen to you because you're so passionate about what you do. I'm being mindful of time. I've already mentioned this. Who in government is currently doing what you want to do? Make sure you reach out to them. And if they say no, that's okay. Reach out to someone else. It's usually more than one or two or three people that you would find that would be interested, that are doing something that you're interested in. Reach out to them, learn about the gaps that currently exist and how you can position yourself to fill that. And the last thing is, how do you enter? I talked a lot about networking. When a job advert is placed with government, we do tend to generally have a checklist. So, and it's similar to most jobs that you would find out there. There would be some things that are required and other things that are desired. Some skill sets are desired and some are required. When I review resumes and cover letter, I see a lot of what candidates write and tell me they are good at this. I'm able to do this. I have a very good interpersonal skill set. I'm a very good communicator. It's great. You're telling me you're good at it. You need to show me. You need to demonstrate how. You need to state specific cases that you've actually displayed those skill sets. So that's one of the things that I know personally I look for, and many of my colleagues will look for as well. So when you see a job advert that you're interested in, make sure that in your cover letter and your resume, you check all the boxes. You don't only state that you are good at it, you state specific examples if you have them. When you say you're a good communicator, you have very good writing and oral skills. The best way to show it is that you've presented, at a wide range of audiences. You've presented at academic conferences, but not just at that. You've presented to farmers at extension events. You've presented to high school students, at Ag in the classroom. Having those specific examples, it enriches. And for me, as someone evaluating the resume, I'm saying, yes, this person really checked all those boxes. And that's all I have just at this moment. And I would turn it over to the moderator, and I'll also stick around to hear any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Semioju. That was a very insightful presentation. And thanks so much. We would have really loved to actually follow up with some questions, as I was jotting a few things down just to start off. But with the way we've actually arranged things, we'll want the second presentation to occur, and then we'll sum up with the questioning section. So we'll be very happy if you could actually stick around for a while.
Sounds good. I'll be here.
Thank you so much. So I would actually do same by reading a very short bio for our next presentation for the next speaker. So with this next speaker, he is a technical specialist in swine and poultry nutrition at Jeffo Nutrition Incorporation Canada, supporting clients across North America. With an over 10 years of experience in monogastric animal nutrition, Dr. Timi holds a master's and PhD from Purdue University, where he specialized in cutting-edge enzyme technologies to enhance poultry and swine performance. As an African professional thriving in Canada agriculture, he's passionate about inspiring young Africans to explore opportunities in the sector. So help me welcome Dr. Olufemi Babatunde. He is our next speaker. And he'll be talking on from classroom to career opportunities in the field of agriculture, Canada. I'm not sure if
Can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can.
Okay, trying to figure out how to turn on my video, but
video.
I can't.
Okay, I think it will be rectified shortly. Could you please try again? Let's see if. Yep. Now I think you're live. Yes, please, I can.
Hello, Kenneth. How you doing?
Fine, very fine. Yourself?
I'm doing fantastic.
That's great.
I'm doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to be here and to be asked to speak today. So, permit me to share. I mean, I don't have a. Let me see. Mm. 1 second, I'm trying to share my screen, but.
Oh, okay. I think there are things going on to be rectified shortly. Just a moment. Could you please try again? Let's see if it's possible. It's off. So I think whilst we try to actually rectify the problem for Dr. Olufemi, would probably proceed. We're trying to ask Dr. Timi a few questions, even as he tries to sort things out.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Timi or Joe, kindly permit me to call you Dr. Timi.
Or
I
just to
hope
me.
it's
Or
okay. Okay, Timi.
just to me, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. It was quite interesting, sincerely. I must confess, reading your bio, and then I got to a point I had, sensors, remote sensing. And I'm like, okay. I did something in relation to remote sensing a little bit. And talking about those parameters, soil moisture, all of those things, they were very critical part of, I'll say, my parameters collection on the field, because I was trying to monitor phenology. So this GDDs actually become very important in all of those things. So I was quite interested. But it's interesting how you moved from soil to become more like a meteorologist in a way. How did that happen?
Yeah, no, that's really great question. And one of the things that, at least for me, that I've noticed is we have capacity to do more than we think we can. For many of the listeners that have listened to Scotiabank's adverts, one of their tagline is "You are richer than you think." And anytime I hear that tagline, I'm like, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. Now that's from a banking perspective, and they have their own agenda. But in the real sense, I think we do have capacity as long as the interest is there. So for me, the combination of weather and agriculture has always been, that intersection has always been something I'm passionate about. One, based on the experience I had with my capstone, my final year project, but the capacity to build into it is mainly based on burning the midnight oil. There's really no shortcut to being to hard work. You just have to do it. So I know one of the things that was really challenging was learning about machinery. It's not an area that I'm very strong in, and now I'm managing the crop production for the province, and everything crop related, and I have staff that I work with, and I still don't know everything, but I'm really passionate and always eager to learn. So I think as long as the desire to learn is there, we all can actually pivot into different areas. And it's just about making sure that, one, we are able to, I want to look at the end goal. What's the goal? The goal is to develop expertise in this area. And I would want, okay, what do I need to do to develop those expertise? YouTube videos, not all of them are great, but some are really good. Who do I need to talk to? Sometimes I would ask farmers, can I just sit in your tractor and let's just discuss as you harvest, and just go on harvest with them, or maybe when they are seeding. So different things that they do. And it's about really wanting to step out and learn that way. I see Dr. Olufemi Babatunde back. So
Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah, I wanted to actually step in and say, probably we just take our last questions and then we just do a
okay.
switch. But since probably he's here, we just want him to actually have his bite with the presentation, and then we can lump everything together with the questioning section. Thank you so much for the cooperation.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Dr. Olufemi, I'm back again to you.
I apologize for the glitch.
No problem. These things happen.
Yeah, so I think I do not use Zoom on this computer, so it kind of was
Okay.
asking for a lot of permissions and stuff. So it eventually kicked me out. But okay, I'm here, so that's good. Yes, I was saying before that it was a pleasure, definitely, to be invited to come speak here, and I have the pleasure of talking about from classroom to careers, opportunities in the field of agriculture in Canada. Um, I was thinking about this topic and I was like, what do I necessarily have to share? Maybe just thinking about the fact that, it's my story, even any special or any different from anybody's story. But I do feel like, there's always the opportunity to learn one or two things from our stories. And so my journey into career in Canada was actually not a pretty straight one, just because, I didn't initially want to come to Canada. But, life happens along the way, and somehow you find yourself in different places, and you just try to make the best of it. So I think I should, just give a little bit of a educational background and backstory of myself, and then I'll try to tie it up to where I am at this point in my journey. So I was born in Nigeria, in Ibadan to be precise. How did I get interest in the field of agriculture? I went to the boarding house in secondary school, and I remember that my housemaster, or the dormitory master for the boys, had some chickens and rabbits at the back of his house. And somehow I found out that he had that. And that was my first introduction to someone having animals or whatever in their house. And trust me, I was the most fascinated kid ever. We have always lived in the city. We never had like any pets or whatever. So it was like my really first experience with having animals, and I was too excited. I remember I would spend most evenings at the back of his house, just looking at the rabbits, looking at the chickens, and I would ask him, "Oh, how do you feed them? Can you, show me how to do this?" And eventually just let me handle them, so he wouldn't even come out anymore to look at them, and I was just taking care of them. And I remember the first time the rabbits had babies. Oh my goodness. I was like over the moon, like, oh, this is how it happens. So it was my first introduction into animals. And I remember going back home during the holidays. I told my mom, I said, she wanted me, or my parents wanted me to be a medical doctor. I said, it's not happening anymore. I want to be a vet. I'm not having any business with medicine anymore. I've found, animals, and there was a lot of pushback, as you would expect from, African parents. Oh no, you have to be a doctor, a medical doctor. There's no perspective for veterinary doctors in Nigeria back then. They hardly get any, but I was, I said, this is what I want to do. I just developed that passion for animals. And then eventually I applied to the University of Ibadan. Of course, my parents, asked me to apply for medicine. So I remember in my jam, I chose medicine as what I wanted to study because I didn't, have a choice. But eventually I didn't get selected for medicine. I got selected for agriculture, which was kind of, surprising because I had a really great post-UTME score. And it was typical that I didn't make the cutoff for medicine, but I made the cutoff for dentistry. I made the cutoff for, other professions that were still close to medicine. So it was, the thought that, oh, if I didn't do medicine, maybe I'll do dentistry or do biochemistry or something that would eventually get me back into the medical. But then somehow, the letter came in and said, oh, I was selected for agriculture. I was like, well, I did tell you guys I wanted to do vet medicine. I guess this is, God working or something. So I eventually went to the Faculty of Agriculture. I found out, oh, okay, so what departments are here? And they said, oh, they have animal science. I'm like, oh, okay. I think I've gotten what I want to do then. I'll just do. So right from, the first day I stepped into the Faculty of Agriculture, I knew I was going to do animal science just because, I had already had that great experience with animals. So from the first day I was asking, oh, do I go to animal science immediately? But they said, oh, no, you have to do, the first 2 years doing general agriculture. And then in the third year, you could move into the department. But I knew I was going right from the first day. I was like, okay, no problem. And so that's how my journey into animal science came into being. And I did move to the department in 300 level. I did really well. I finished with a first class from animal science. And then afterwards, I went to serve. That's usually compulsory 1 year youth service. And during that period, I was posted to a farm. So I felt like, destiny was working in my favor. So it was a pretty big farm in Edo State, Nigeria. They hired, and prior to that, sometimes you do a lot of theoretical work at university. You don't get to do too much of practical work. So even though I'd done animal science, I'd done, my project, I'd raised birds, I raised broilers for my project, working with minerals with those birds, I still didn't feel like I had a lot of practical experience in agriculture until I went for that 1 year service. And so during that period, it was a really big farm. They had a poultry unit, they had both broilers and layers, they had a swine unit, they had ruminants, they had even a dog section. They had like a lot of fish, aqua. So I got to, play a role in all of those different departments. And then because of the location of the farm, they really didn't have a lot of people that were super educated. So somehow I found myself doing some form of technical services. And it was, after the fact or years later that I actually figured out that that is what I was doing, because I was training the staff. I would get information online, what is going on in other places. I would try to figure out different things with nutrition, different things with management, and I would train the staff and all of that. So I guess that's also my first experience with doing some form of technical services. So after I was done with that, I went back to my base. I did um, I did some work doing some business. I started raising dogs. I was a dog breeder for a while and all of that. And then at some point, I decided, I just wanted to find opportunities outside the country to see where, how I could further my education or get more experience outside of Nigeria. And so I applied to a couple of places, and luckily enough, I got accepted to Purdue, and that was in the US. And so a year after I finished my service, I moved to the US, and then I did a master's in animal nutrition with Professor Adiola at Purdue. I can say those were some of my best years at Purdue because, I really got introduced into real core research in animal nutrition. I felt like, okay, my background in Nigeria just give me the base to actually understand
A lot of things.
at least what an animal is, right? Or what a chicken is, just give me like a good background, But at Purdue, I remember the first class, I ever attended at Purdue. I was like, oh my goodness, this is way above my pay grade, my thinking or whatever. And it was just a biochemistry class. And I was supposed to take that with like what undergrads actually. But they were really tough. And I remember so back in Nigeria, when we do courses, we'd register for 10 courses in a semester. And then here it's like, oh, I should register for 2 or 3. I was like, just 2? Just 3? I used to do 10, but when I actually started, I knew that even 2 was a mouthful, was a lot to chew on. You would have exams and quizzes, every 2 weeks or something. It was intense, but at the same time, it's really it was a great experience for sure. I got to really understand, the science, all of the full technological advancements in my field that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get while I was in Nigeria. And then my advisor, also happened to be the one that pushed me a little bit into the area that I'm currently working on, and that was with enzymes. Prior to coming to Purdue, I had, no idea what enzymes were because we didn't use enzymes back in Nigeria, but I had my first experience working with enzymes. I started with phytase enzymes. I did a lot of great work with a lot of companies, that were trying to do research in in this area. And so I finished my master's, published a couple of papers. And that's another thing that I really appreciate my advisor for, was pushing us, to be able to publish papers and, just have, put yourself out there.
Out there.
And, all of this is, I'm giving all of this talk because, the topic says from classroom, to careers. I'm just trying to give you, a bit of, different things that did help in the classroom to get me to the point where I am. So I published a lot of papers with my master's, and then I decided that I was going to continue a PhD with him, just because I really loved what I was doing. So with my PhD, I worked with more enzymes. Now I divided a bit into proteases, into carbohydrates, and different species. And so again, lots of papers published, and then I had the opportunity to attend lots of conferences, actually see what was going on in the industry, really hone my skills with presenting. I remember that even before getting to Purdue, I don't think I could present, so very, I couldn't even use Microsoft Office as well. But I remember right from the first semester, we had to do this. It was like a departmental course, but it involved you, presenting to the whole department on a chosen topic. So whether you liked it or not, now you had to build, your confidence. And I was so super worried on how, because now you're dealing with people from different places that speak maybe better English than you do. You have that nervousness of, oh, I have an accent, or how do I even, relate the information that I want to. And at this point, I should mention that having a great mentor or having a great support system really goes a long way. And so I cannot but just, appreciate a fellow colleague, a student that was like me, but, ahead of me in the program, Dr. Sahid Osho. He was a really great mentor for me because he was already in the system. He really put me through a lot of things that I had issues comprehending, how to, navigate my way around, classes and combine it with research. It really gave me, I usually tell him that, I stood up on his shoulders. I hope I didn't break his shoulders before I left, but it's always great to have, a sort of mentor. At any time point, they go a long way to help you feel more confident, because you would make mistakes. You're coming from an entirely different country. There's cultural shocks. There's, I haven't even spoken about the fact that, I experienced my first winter. A lot of things that will practically like derail you from going through. But I had a lot of support, and I remember then it would say, oh, why don't you write this paper? Sometimes I'm tired, I don't want to write anything. I'm saying, oh, come on, go ahead, write that abstract, submit it to this conference. Oh, there's this another department is hosting like a poster session. Take your poster, take it there. So it really encouraged me to do all of those things. And I also tried my best to be that same sort of mentor or to other people, that eventually came after me, because there's always a great benefit in having, those type of mentors that just support you through your journey. And so putting all of this together, they really made my program at Purdue great. I had, I think at the end of my program, I published about 12 papers. I'd presented at different conferences. I'd pushed myself even way beyond, what I would typically have done. And I cannot, claim all the credit for that, because I really did have a great support system, and it gave me a lot of confidence to be able to talk about, what I am doing today. So afterwards, when I was done with Purdue, I was trying to figure out, what do I do? What's going to be my next point, or how do I progress from here? I got a job offer, but the only issue I had was that my wife had not been able to join me at Purdue. So it wasn't exactly a pleasant journey to have my wife and I separate. So decided, okay, I will try to explore other areas. And so eventually Canada came up as an option. Like, okay, what can I find in Canada? And so I also had interest in working with pigs. And so in my field of monogastric nutrition, you can either work a lot with poultry or with pigs or with both. Now, I did do some work with pigs. I did some work with pigs at Purdue, but a lot of my work was tilted more towards poultry. So I felt, okay, if I could find something with pigs, it would definitely give me an advantage because now I have the full broad experience with monogastric nutrition. And so I saw the opportunity on LinkedIn of a postdoc position opening at the Private Swine Center um, in Saskatoon. And then was also in affiliation with the University of Saskatchewan. It was posted by, I think it was by Dan Columbus then. So I said, okay, I would apply for this and see if it works out. Fortunately, it worked out. I spoke with Dan. I also, heard a couple of good things from him and also from the facility. That was a good facility to learn a lot of, in-depth research with pigs. It's like, okay, I've done a lot of work with poultry. It would be great to also have that in-depth experience with pigs. And so, I did the move. And again, in addition to the fact that my wife could also join me in Canada because they made it easier for your spouse to join you on that. And so that began the journey to Canada. And then 2 years ago, we did the move, came to Canada, started that postdoctoral position at Prairie Swine Center. And then I moved way up north. I remember telling all of my friends that I was moving from West Lafayette in the US up north, to Canada. And we're like, I'm going into the middle of nowhere, going into the freezer. How do I go from cold to coldest? There was nothing I didn't hear. And then to even pronounce Saskatchewan was like, they murdered it a couple of times. But, I had a purpose. I definitely knew that I wanted to for that facility to be there. I know there were people there. People are definitely living here, so I won't be the only one here. So we did the move. We moved here to Canada, came to Saskatoon, and then I did that thing. I was at the Prairie Swine Center for my postdoc for about a year and a half. It was also a really great experience. Did a lot of work with pigs. Did a lot of work with more statistics. I was working on like a meta-analysis on pigs. And so it's added to the experience I already had with chickens because now I was doing, some really great work with early nutrition in pigs, with protein. So it was a bit different from what I had done before. I also, had the opportunity to collaborate at the University of Saskatchewan, went to a couple of conferences, published a couple of papers, which was all good. And then I decided, do I really want to stay in academia? I don't know. Is it everything I thought it would be? No. So I started, searching for that position out there. Fortunately, I found the position with Jeffo as a technical specialist. And I should mention that there are a lot of areas where you can specialize in the industry. There's pure research and development, R&D, there's technical services, there's sales, there's, different areas. I kind of wasn't leaning more towards full research just because my personality, I prefer to travel. I love traveling. My wife will tell you I love traveling. I love interacting with people. I love, you know, just speaking, just like this. I've had a lot of people tell me that I present well now, not when I started, but now I think because of the experience I had at Purdue, it really honed my presentation skills. So now I have, that I like, to present, to share information. And so it just seemed like a great fit to apply for that position. And I did. I remember having those interviews, and just speaking about myself, speaking about the experience I had. And I think an advantage for me was that I had the experience from Nigeria, I had the experience from the US, I had the experience from Canada, and it kind of just fitted into what they were looking for. So, I also had that all of those different experiences that I'd gathered from different conferences from the classroom, and I was able to bring a lot of that into the work I'm doing now. And so currently I've been with Jeff for about a year and a couple of months. I can tell you it's been a really great experience. Giving me, a much more in-depth look into the animal industry in Canada. It's different from what is in the US for sure. They're similar, but also different. There's some peculiarities that you can only find in Canada. And I've also had the opportunity to meet a lot of people, hear the challenges that are going on with raising animals in Canada, also dealing with regulatory, with the CFIA, dealing with, different bodies, dealing with the government sometimes, a lot of those experiences that now I can, get and or I have now, and I can also learn every day. I'm still learning for sure. You never know everything, but it's been such a great experience. So let me just, I'm trying to keep to my time because I see I'm almost out of my time, but I'll just pull out, a couple of pointers that will definitely help. It's possible you're out there, you started your journey here in Canada, beautiful. Always take out the opportunity to network with people. I remember when they used to tell me to network, I'm like, what am I networking about? What am I going to say? But trust me, it's, the value, one of your values is in the people you know, truly. So take the opportunity to network when you have the opportunity to go to conferences. Actually volunteer in some of these conferences. They have that benefit of putting you out there. Someone sees your face. Oh, I've seen you somewhere before, and then it opens other doors for you. You might even have a job already, but depending on your role, maybe you need some information, maybe you need something extra. Just the fact that you have been seen before gives you that opportunity. And then put yourself out there. Don't be scared. I know as international, sometimes we have that tendency to want to shy away from a couple of things, not to put yourself out there. Maybe you're worried you have an accent or they wouldn't understand me as such. No, put yourself out there. It gives you opportunities. And Canada is really blessed in such a way that they accept a lot of immigrants. They have a welcoming attitude towards immigrants. And so to a good extent, at least, you wouldn't just be entirely shut out. You still have the opportunity to prove yourself. So take use of that opportunity. If you can publish papers, go ahead and publish as many papers as you can. There's great benefits there. I'm trying to think of, you need mentors for sure. Even right now, as I'm currently working with Jeffo, I still have mentors that put me through. There are people that I can always send a message. I'm having this issue. I feel like I don't know what to do here. You've been in this, you've been working at this role for a long time. How did you handle this? And I always, get great help. Use LinkedIn as a resource. Trust me, there are great people there that you can reach out to. One of the people I reached out to when I was trying to interview for this role, I met him on LinkedIn. Moj, thank you, Moj, wherever you are. You're such a great help. I just reached out to him on LinkedIn. I was like, Moj, I see that you've been doing technical services for a long time. Tell me about this role. What does it involve? What does it entail? And it was really, really helpful in putting me through. So you need mentors. Those are some things that would help you. And then never burn bridges.
Sure.
Wherever you are, I know sometimes you can say, oh, my advisor we didn't really have a great relationship, or maybe I had some issues with some professor, but never burn bridges, because you never know when you would need their help, or, you will have a connection with them. And sometimes, it's possible wherever you are, they're saying, oh, I hear your professor is a great guy in the industry. We need this, but you have burnt that bridge already. Now, how do you get across? So don't never burn bridges, and as much as possible, make friends across the class, among your colleagues, among people from different schools. It's definitely valuable. I remember at my current job, someone was saying, oh, one of the reasons we hired you is because we feel like you would know a lot of people in the US, you would know a lot of people also in Canada. So sometimes your worth is also in the people you know. So definitely make friends. Your colleagues in school today are the ones that will be your customers in the future, or would be sometimes even your competitors or your colleagues at work, whatever. So make friends.
Sure.
When you go for those conferences, when you see people from other schools, definitely try to make connections or make friends. Those are the networking, that we're talking about, and they would help you. I hope I've not spoken too much. I've tried to guys everything together. So
Well on point, yeah, and hitting them right on the head. Oh, thanks so much, and it's very interesting because I see a lot of I'll say similarities between a few of the points that you've actually honed on with that of Timi. Very interesting points, and I just want to ask a few questions in here, but because we have two speakers, I know Mr. Ayeribi would also step in at some point trying to ask some questions. But I would like to actually direct them to specific speakers because I see a lot of similarity, and it's very interesting because a scenario you created was probably a very similar thing that Temi actually mentioned. And I'm like, oh, see, putting yourself out there, creating a voice for yourself, and all of this. But I just want to ask Dr. Timi this. Timi. He says I should call him Timi. So you spoke about having a voice, and when you're listening to Femi, he was talking about when he decided to defend what he loved. There was a brick. There was a brick wall. His parents had to actually shut him down in trying to make him pursue what they want or what they would love for him to do. And I know you also mentioned about having passion for something that you love, which is very true, and trying to have that voice to stand for what you believe in such situations, how do you manage those situations? Because he had the mind, he had the passion. This is what I want to do, but there was a brick wall. There was that parents factor trying to actually limit him. How do you try to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question, and thanks to Dr. Babatunde for sharing those really wonderful nuggets. I made notes here myself as well. It's interesting that we seem to have a similar path.
That's true.
In terms of, and I think it's because the way growing up in Nigeria as well, many parents would want you to, go for medicine or engineering, and it's good because the way that the thought process worked is that those type of courses would give you a step ahead. Agriculture, I know the first time I told my parent I wanted to study soil science, the eyes and the way they looked at me, like, are you really serious, or is this one of your jokes? And I said, no, it's something I want to do. And for good reasons. They love us. The advice they are given is coming from the place of love. So in my case, I was able to tell them, let me do this in 1 year. And because the question my dad asked me was, so what do you want to do with soil science? And the reality is I didn't have an answer for that. But I told him, give me 1 year. After 1 year, if I don't still have an answer that is good enough, then I can I would consider something else. And in that first year, went to the head of department at the time, spoke with him, asked him, I'm in this department, but I have no clue what I want to do with it, other than the fact that I know that I'd love a job that would get me a mix of being indoor at the office and also being outdoor. That was my initial passion coming from high school. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do something that would keep me just in the lab or and I didn't want medicine. I didn't want that. So anything that would take me away from medicine, I think I'm good. But I really didn't have a good answer to what I wanted to do with soil science. But in speaking with Dr. Salako at the time, he went on to become the vice chancellor for University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, and he sat me down, told me a lot of things about soil physics and soil chemistry, soil microbiology, soil genealogy, and I was just like, wow, just soil science, you have all these various branches. And he said, oh yeah, it was telling me so many things about what you can do. such that I was really pumped about soil science. And the same thing, when you see me as an undergrad at a time when we have an event and people say, well, I'm a vet doctor, I'm in medicine, I'm in mechanical engineering. I'm also very proud to say I'm in soil science, and everybody kind of like, oh, soil. They seem to want you to be ashamed of what you do, but that was not me. I was proud to be a soil scientist right from my first year. So I would say when you hit a roadblock about what you want to do, for me, and it happens in life too, beyond just this conversation,
Sure.
I always consider two things. Is this roadblock based on me not listening to sound advice? So I also
Okay.
want to always be mindful and check myself. I don't want to assume I know everything. And so when multiple people, are saying the same thing, I tend to just step back and say, okay, I know I have a passion in this thing, but I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people telling me, are you sure of that route that you want to take? So I do take some time to self-evaluate and, retrospect on why I'm doing what I'm doing. If I still feel, and being a Christian, I rely on the God factor to give me intuition as to what I want to do. So if I still feel strongly about what I want to do, regardless of the opposition, I'll still press on to do it. But I don't want to just discount the counsel. So very similar to what, my parents wanting me to study something different. I didn't just want to discount their counsel because they've seen it that yes, if you're a doctor, you don't have to be walking the streets to find a job. There is often ready job available, at least at the time. I don't know what it's happening now. So the advice they were given was coming from a good place, but I also knew what I wanted to do wasn't that. So I had to kind of negotiate and have conversation around what's best. So hopefully I've answered that question, but oftentimes I think there's a need to not just discount some of those voices. It's good to at least hear them out, know where it's coming from, and then reevaluate your stance if where you're coming from is still what you should do, or you need to heed to those advice.
Thank you so much. I think Mr. Avery wants to do a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Timi. I just want to do a quick reminder for all our audience that you can use the Q&A session to ask your questions, and then we don't want it to just be unidirectional, so we want to hear from you as well. But this particular question will be going to Dr. Olufemi, and I must say, yeah, it's a pleasure meeting you again. My first time of seeing you was at the Midwest Conference in 2020. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah. And so my question to you is something from what Dr. Timi said. Dr. Timi said we should understand the gaps, be able to fill it. So you mentioned some things in animal science. You've mentioned technical services. You've mentioned consulting. You've mentioned R&D and all those other fields. So my question to you is there any trendy, position, like it's like hot cake? It's like they are looking for people in that in that industry right now that you can let us know of, so that anybody who is here looking for a job can start to gather skills, towards that field, whether in poultry or swine, or even in non-ruminants. So, what position is trendy right now for animal scientists for today?
Let me see. Trendy. It's interesting when I hear the word trendy. I feel like there's a place for everyone for sure. But currently I think I think there's a lot of demand for sales, because that's also another area in the field. They require a lot of people to actually go, sell some of the products that we make. And so I keep hearing the conversation, oh, we can actually get, a lot of good people sell the product. Now, if you've probably done like a master's or a PhD, that might not necessarily look as attractive, right? Because you're like, oh, sales. I'm not a salesperson. I want to do research. But again, I'm just telling you an area that I know that currently they're looking for people to fill those areas. Now, if you've done like a master's or a PhD, that's a whole different ball game. You're probably interested in doing something more advanced. And so I would say that some of the trendy areas now will be with the use of AI for sure. A lot of conferences that I'm attending, there's a lot of talk on the use of AI, in the barns, monitoring different aspects of raising animals, looking at temperatures, looking at using temperatures to measure the performance of animals, looking at big data and things like that. So for sure, if you are able to include that in your skill set, having that extra knowledge on how to handle data, so maybe I'll call that data analytics, or I'll call that, project management and things like that, because all of this will definitely give you that additional edge and not just narrow you down to something that just says R&D, right? So I remember, my current company, there's a guy that is doing a lot of work on sustainability. Those are hot topics: sustainability, precision nutrition. So that's the area where we are, heading towards. And you're like, oh, my research area doesn't have anything to do with that. But you can, tailor in, find a way, in which your research, actually ties in towards, some of these areas that we're looking at, reduction of the footprint of agriculture, reducing carbon footprint or carbon emissions, things like that, are definitely areas where you can, gain an advantage for yourself, because we are all heading, towards that direction. We're leaving just raising animals just for the sake of it. We're trying to make sure that we're doing it in a better way. So if you're able to inculcate some of that information, so some AI, some technology, because trust me, there's a lot of technology coming into, raising animals. We're not there yet, but we are definitely heading towards that. So if you can add that skill set into what you're currently doing, it gives you that edge for sure. I hope I've been able to answer your question. I can't tell
Yeah,
you
right
exactly.
on point. Right on point. Thank you so much. Yeah. So just to elaborate that, I was attending a conference with CEO of ICYA and even the deputy CEO, because earlier in sustainability was a big deal. Even my employer was saying, I want to reduce my carbon footprint. And so everything I went to that conference to listen to was, how do we do that? And, yeah. So it was, we're very grateful that you're able to. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and that's so true. So now you could talk about life cycle analysis, the sustainability, and the greenhouse gases. Interestingly, I'm working a bit on greenhouse gases now. I'm looking at importantly carbon dioxide, methane, and then the nitrous oxides a little bit in that aspect. So I know it's kind of a hot cake now. Yeah, and thanks for that insight. Yeah, there was a particular question I really wanted to pose, but before I come to that question, I want to direct this to Timi. So you've been an industry person and you've kind of juggled in and out, like of academia. But from your experience in government, what challenges do you see new graduates facing, that is entering into government positions in the field of agriculture, and how can they overcome some of these challenges?
No, that's such a great question, and thanks for that. One thing with government, and it's the same regardless of which level of government, every government is always mindful of budgets. That's something you hear about a lot. And generally, governments are attuned to what the public wants. So if government sees that, well, the public isn't really interested so much in agriculture, then the budget assigned to agriculture isn't as great as much as it could have been if a lot of people are talking about agriculture to the government. So it's something that I think cuts across all governments. Agriculture, I think we are at that point in which most governments are just trying to maintain the level such that they likely won't hire a new staff or create a new position if someone is not retiring.
Okay.
That being said, though, within government, I've also seen people move around. So, and it creates spaces. And looking at the Canadian labor market, we know that many of the baby boomers have started retiring. I think that started almost 5, 6 years ago. So I do see that there would be more opportunities. Now, it's maybe not as much as it could have been if new positions are being created. Not that none is being created at all, but not as much as it could have been. Now, we were talking about AI. That's a position that never existed. And I do see now that many governments would be taking that opportunity or those steps to create some of those new positions. We talk about genomics. That's not something, that's a new or evolving area that governments will be creating new spaces. So in terms of challenges for new graduates, I think one is there's more competition for fewer spaces within government. So that's why I've usually just encouraged new graduates, spread your wings across. Don't rely on just one thing. It's good to look at government, but just like Dr. Babatunde said, look at industry, look at academia, look at all these other things, research institutes, NGOs even. So because the most important thing is working in the area of your expertise and making sure that you are able to continue to, provide those valuable information. Because regardless of where you are, the other thing is commodity association. Many people don't look into that. I know in Manitoba, we have the Manitoba Crop Alliance. In Saskatchewan, there's Sask Wheat, Sask Barley for crops. And similar organizations exist for animal science. And so there's also opportunities in those specific commodity association as well. So I would say the challenge for government is that there's often a lot of people applying for limited space. And one of the positions that I know was advertised within government recently, it's only one position, but there were over 40 applicants, qualified applicants, that actually made the cut, that meet the requirements. So I think the number one challenge for new graduates is just the amount of competition out there for the limited space. But despite the competition, it's about making sure you're able to stand out. And the way to stand out is what we've discussed earlier. Dr. Babatunde mentioned mentorship. You can actually ask someone in the position you're interested in, would you mind being a mentor for me? I just want to understand more of what you do. And I like the analogy, and it's something I'm going to take away. Telling someone, I hope your neck or your shoulder isn't breaking from me standing so much.
Yeah.
I really like that, and I made a note of it. Thanks so much for that. And that's the truth. No one can get to anywhere without the assistance of others. So we need to really see how others can help to shape what we know, but help us to get better at it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There are some questions in the chat, so I'm just going to read them out. So the first question goes to Dr. Joe. Thank you for your presentation. During your undergraduate research work, how critical was the understanding of agricultural policy, given that not a lot of these is being taught in schools? And how can one fill this gap in one's career journey? Just before you go ahead and answer that question, there's another one for Dr. Tunde. So I'll just read it out so you start to think something answer. Yeah, so Dr. Babatunde, this goes to you. Thanks to the organizing body for such a webinar. I am offshore participant seeking to migrate to Saskatchewan. my post-secondary education hasn't been a straight path, as I had my BSc in environmental science and MSc in animal protection and technology, poultry focus. Apparently, I have interest in poultry house management and a growing interest in poultry nutrition. I would be glad if I could get a career counsel or coaching from Dr. Olufemi and other senior colleagues. So this is somebody seeking to migrate. You have some migration experiences, so maybe you have some few points of counsel and advice for this person. Thank you. So Dr. Timi Ojo first, and then Dr. Babatunde will go after. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great, and such a great question. It's not everything that we get taught in school. So agricultural policy, I think it's a critical one because it affects, and depending on where you're looking at, you're thinking of maybe I'm thinking more in terms of the marketing of grain, for instance. That's something I know there's a lot of policy around that. And even just in terms of biosecurity, a lot of policy around it and some regulation. Right now, I coordinate the crop residue burning program, and that's another policy. And many of these things I almost not discussed at all. At least I wasn't aware of many of those being taught as a course. The way that I was able to fill that gap in my career is also listening to podcasts and webinars. And also, there's so many agricultural, well, it used to be news paper that would be sent in the department every week. There is a subscription, but now you can actually just check those online. And it's about really looking at where can I find this information in Manitoba, or actually across the prairies. We have many of these. We have the glacial media, and they are really great with many of these journal information, and not so much of journal, but actually newspaper. And so I'd say read many of these, depending on the area of interest. There's just so much to read, so much to know, and depending on how deep you want to go into it, you can maybe go as wide as you want. So I would say get the niche that you want to. It's almost impossible to know everything. It's good to have the interest, but it's almost impossible. But find that niche area that you're interested in. And what I do when I go to some of these news, I don't want to be advertising one over the other, but what I do, I just go on the search function and search for the keyword that I'm interested in. So if I'm interested in policy, recently there was an issue with, well, the potential issue. Before it was canola and some of the disease and the shipments, especially with China and some of the trade disputes. So you can go on some of these agriculture specific newspaper online and search the keywords about some of the policy around it. AEFC have such a fantastic depth of information on their website as well about so many different policies. So that's what I would suggest in terms of where to find information about agricultural policy, which isn't being discussed or at least being taught in schools.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that insight into policy. Over to you.
Okay. I don't know. I get this question a lot of times. A lot of people will send me a message on LinkedIn. Right, migrating to Canada, I did this and that, and I'm not an immigration expert, so I should say that upfront. Disclaimer. Okay. I think what I can say is that immigration and then your career, like two different areas that somehow you just have to marry together if it works. And sometimes, it doesn't exactly work that way. You can immigrate to a place and have started in animal science, and then because of the way at which you came in, now you're having to divert into something else. So it's always a bit of a challenge. Second challenge is that I don't know where this person is coming from, but it's always tough for degrees from Africa, let me put Africa as a whole, or a lot of other international places, to be fully recognized, in North American systems. And so, you would sometimes you would even have a PhD from Nigeria and you would apply for a role in Canada and you wouldn't even be considered, at all. So that's also another challenge, and, why you will see people, begin to switch around. So, what can I say to this particular case? I see you have an undergrad, and then you already have a master's, but you do not have a PhD. Okay, so if you like academia, I can say maybe a route you might want to consider is, thinking about doing a PhD. Um, and that is just you're just trying to put your feet, through the door, have a way to actually come in. And I can see that you've had, like, you did environmental science, you've done animal production and health. So there's a way to marry this, and you don't even have to do something with poultry, but I can see you have something environmental and health related. Trust me, you already have the background in science. And so if you're looking for opportunities in PhD, don't tie yourself down to just poultry. You can broaden that horizon a little bit, look for opportunities that have to do with, animal health, crop health. Sometimes I've had friends that, they had an animal science background, they moved into crop because, that's where the opportunity is. So it just depends on, what exactly you want to do. But I would say if you can get the opportunity to do a PhD, that's definitely a route a lot of people have used, to come into the country. Hopefully you get funding and a scholarship of some sort that makes that, easier. And from there you can begin to navigate, through the terrains, of going through the program and getting a job. So, but again, as I said, immigration is always a bit tricky to come through. But I hear people say, coming in as a student is much easier, than other routes. So if you come in as a PR, now you're struggling to try to get a job with your degree. They don't recognize it. You're now scrambling to look for something else. So, but we can talk further later. Maybe you can send me a message.
Okay. Oh, sincerely speaking, we would actually love to go on with this questioning. There are a lot of questions that I actually wrote down. There's a question that I actually wanted to ask on mentorship, because I realized both of you actually touched on, with a very good example coming from Femi with Dr. Saeed. Um, but as we actually plan to wrap things up within a specific time limit, I would want to actually revert back to the host, so that he can actually finish things off. Probably in the coming months, we might actually call on you again, because it's been a very interactive section. It's been very fruitful, with a lot of the answers being provided to us. There's, like, with response to some of the questions that we are posing, it's been very, very helpful, and would actually love to actually hear from you again. But at this point, I'll just hand over to Mr. Yorubi. Thank you so much, Dr. Timi and Dr. Femi. It's been good having this interaction with you, sincerely.
Thank you
All
for having me.
right. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time and the insightful. This has been a very, very great, session. We really, really grateful for coming today. I just want to say to our audience and people listening, especially for the person who asked the question about how to immigrate, we have a session in December that's actually focused on students or agricultural professionals who are outside the US. So to be a roundtable discussion for some of us who are through the system, discussing, things that you can do to successfully immigrate. So please look forward to that. That's in December and November. Some list coming up, to be precise, November 3, 2 other list coming to us. So we just wanted you to look forward to that. Please don't forget, you can always follow us on our website, IYCA. All the information. Also, we're also on Spotify, so you can listen to all the sessions again. And so, with that, we are going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please, if you still have some questions, you can send it after now. You get to give us feedback. If you still have questions, please make sure you send them in and forward it to speakers. To be able to answer those questions. So, thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.